What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. This is Courtside TV. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get into it. So today, I wanted to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers, who are currently up 2-0 on the Wizards in the first round. They seem to be well on their way to a first-round victory. So kind of talk about them, where they're at in the playoffs at this point, who their potential matchup is going to be in the next round, and where they might end up going. So the Sixers are in just as good of a spot as anybody in the Eastern Conference because, really the conference only ended up being 6 teams deep this year. And what I mean by that is that there were really only 6 teams in the conference, those being the top 6 seeds, that were, you think might be able to advance out of the first round and make a deep run into this playoffs. Just because, you look at the top 6 teams in the conference, and whether you want to count Miami in that or not, now that they're down 3-0, that's fine. But really you felt like, okay, there's obviously the top 3 and the Sixers, the Bucks, and the Nets. Then you have whoever wins the Knicks-Hawks series, and then Miami, you feel like, is sort of a wild card down there at number 6. So really that means that the top 2 seeds, being Philly and Brooklyn, get some pretty easy matchups in the first round. And we've seen that come to pass with both of them being up 2-0 over the Celtics and over the Washington Wizards, who, those teams are both okay, but you don't feel like they're really going to make anything happen here. So they get effectively a first round bye. They still do have to go out and play these games, but it's looking very, very likely that they'll be able to advance. So they were able to, by earning the 1 seed, playing the best out of any team in the conference over the course of the regular season, they were able to get an easier first round matchup and be able to cruise out of that first round. And then because of the way that the seeding breaks, you also get a chance to go up against either the Knicks or the Hawks in the second round. And no disrespect to either New York or Atlanta, because those are both clearly very good teams. They've earned it all year, and they're competing back and forth with one another. It's going to be a really, really good series. But I would pick Philly against either opponent. I think it's pretty clear at this point that the Sixers are just a better team than either two of those teams. And while you might have a tough series on your hands, I feel like it's definitely a lot easier to make a run to the conference finals against one of those teams rather than having to play either Brooklyn or Milwaukee, because the Nets and the Bucks are likely going to have to play each other. Assuming that they both advance out of their first round series, then it's going to be the Bucks and the Nets in the second round, whereas the Sixers are going to get either the Hawks or the Knicks. And so that certainly appears to be a much easier matchup, because really this conference is 3 teams that could potentially advance out of it, those being Philly, Brooklyn, and Milwaukee, and the Sixers only have to go through one of those teams on their route to making the NBA Finals. So they got pretty lucky with the seeding here. If they don't make the conference finals this season, it will be a disappointment. That there's no other way to phrase it. They're heavily favored over the Wizards, and they're well on their way to winning that series. And they would also be heavily favored over either New York or Atlanta. I would expect them to beat either of those teams in pretty short order. I wouldn't say it would be a sweep, but maybe like 5 or 6 games. I would feel that the Sixers would be able to get either of those teams out of there. So I'm picking them to probably make their way to the conference finals. I think they're perfectly set up to do that because of the way that the seeding shakes out, and so anything less than that I think would be a disappointment for them. So with this team playing as well as they are right now, and them being set up to make a deep run into the playoffs, let's kind of talk about how they're doing that. Well, their first 2 playoff games have really been a balanced attack. I mean, game 1 against the Wizards was a big Tobias Harris game, a big Joel Embiid game. Both of those guys had over 30, I believe. I think Embiid had exactly 30. Harris had like 37. So it was a big explosion from both of those guys. They were able to win pretty handily. It was kind of close there at the end, but they ended up, getting that one over with fairly easily. So they move on there, get that game 1 victory. Game 2, nobody really had a huge explosion. It was a lot of balanced scoring from everybody. Seth Curry had a good game, Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, all of those guys, scoring in double-digit points. I don't have the box score in front of me, but you had a lot of guys who were stepping up and playing well, and no one player had a super great game that carried them to a victory. And again, it wasn't really close. They were able to kind of, get the Wizards out of there pretty quickly. It's pretty clear that this is a mismatch here in the first round. And so they've had this balanced scoring attack with a guy like Tobias Harris and a guy like Seth Curry stepping up and having these big performances in the playoffs. This team is deep. They have a lot of guys who can score and a lot of guys who can play, at a consistent level. And they've now all kind of been there in the playoffs before. This team has been through battles. They're not dealing with injury this year. Last year, obviously, Ben Simmons had to miss their postseason run where they lost to the Celtics in the first round. And now they're fully healthy and they've got all their guys clicking. And, everybody's there and able to help out. So yeah, if they get out of this first round in a sweep and Knicks-Hawks ends up going to 7, they'll be well rested, well ready to be able to, come out strong against their second round opponents and that seems like a very, likely outcome at this point. They'll be able to finish this first round up quickly, and they might have to wait for their opponent, and they'll have like a week or so in order to prepare and get ready while they await who they're going to play in the next round. So that could be a big bonus to them as well, getting that extra rest going into the second round. And they're just so well set up in this conference to be able to make a deep run. So let's talk about how they might match up with either Milwaukee or Brooklyn in the conference finals, if that is indeed the matchup. Against Brooklyn, you're not going to be able to slow down any of their guys. I kind of talked about this with the Bucks yesterday, but the thing that Philly does have is they have a couple of really solid perimeter defenders that can make life hard on Brooklyn Stars. You have obviously Ben Simmons, who is in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. A guy like Matisse Thybulle is also a great disruptor on the perimeter, and we've seen his steal and block stats for the first couple of games in the playoffs, and he's been phenomenal defensively. So you have a couple of these guys that you can stick on, the Nets perimeter players and their stars and make life difficult on them. Obviously, you're not ever going to stop those guys, but you can just make them have to work harder for their buckets, and that's going to be how you kind of can help win that series. And obviously, you have a mismatch there with Joel Embiid being the best player on the Sixers and him being, an MVP candidate and playing super well all season. The Nets don't have a center, really. They have a couple of centers on the roster, and they have guys who are playing small ball center, but they don't really have anybody who can body up on Embiid and make it really, really tough on him to score. He's just going to be able to go right through you like paper, and I think the Nets defense is underrated. I think they do a lot of good things that make life hard for their opponents, but they just don't have the personnel to be an elite defensive team, and they don't really have anybody that can guard Joel Embiid. So if Embiid's getting down there in the post and really making life hard on them and, scoring a ton and playing efficiently and having a good series, then I think that gives them a pretty good chance against Brooklyn. And then if it's Milwaukee, let me be clear about this. I don't think that the Bucks are a better team than the Nets, but I do think that Milwaukee potentially matches up a little bit better against Philadelphia than Brooklyn does. Because like I just said, the Sixers, the way that the Sixers are constructed and the way the Nets are constructed, you would maybe lean towards Philly in sort of a roster construction way. However, the Nets just have a ton of talent, and so that's kind of where the difference would be, just because they have so many good players on their team. Whereas Milwaukee, I think the way that their team is built and structured and where their talent lies is potentially a little bit more, more well-equipped to be able to deal with what Philadelphia has. Just because the Bucks have a lot of guys who can make shots. I think they're a deeper roster than Brooklyn. They have a lot of guys, and we've seen this come to light against the Heat, right? Where they have a ton of guys who can make shots if they're open and knock down these threes and, coming in off the bench being able to shoot. And they have all of these wings who can do things on the perimeter and guys who can create for themselves and create for others. And they've just been absolutely, destroying the Heat on some of these things. So I feel like Milwaukee here, the way that they're constructed is just a little bit more of a traditional team, but they're very, very good at that, very good at just being a normal NBA team, just have a lot of guys who really know their role and can shoot, and just they're really deep and just solid overall. So I think maybe, they would be able to do a little bit of a better job against Philly, just based on how the roster is constructed, even if they don't have as much talent as Brooklyn, if that makes any sort of sense. And obviously, you would assume that Giannis and Embiid would be guarding each other in those high-pressure minutes, when the game's on the line in the crunch time. You would have both of those guys on each other, and we know Giannis, Defensive Player of the Year, super long, super athletic, all that good stuff, and it goes both ways, right? Embiid is also a very good offensive and defensive player, both of them are, so, they probably wouldn't guard each other the whole game, but when it comes to crunch time, that would be the matchup that we would see, and, I would probably favor Giannis in that matchup, but it's definitely a super good one, so that's one to look out for. And then other than that, the Bucks just have a lot of these perimeter players who, like I said, can kind of create for themselves and create for others. Jrue Holiday is super, super good at that, getting his own shots and finding the right time to set teammates up. Chris Middleton can create his own shot as well, and then obviously, like I said, you have guys that can knock down threes if they're open, guys like Bryn Forbes and Pat Connaughton, and you can just go down the line, right? So I feel like the Bucks are a deep roster. The Nets are more talented. Either way, I think Philly could, make it a series against either of those teams, and I don't know who I would pick right now. Obviously, we don't know what the matchup is going to be yet, but in a conference finals, it's looking like it's going to be the Sixers against one of those two teams, and either way, we're setting up for a very, very fun Eastern Conference battle. But yeah, that's about all I have on the 76ers, their start to the playoffs, and their potential path to the conference finals. Like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to. Leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the 76ers and their season, and how it's gone so far, how it's going, how, where ultimately do you think they will advance to. Would love to hear your thoughts down below. But with all that said, I will see you guys in the next one.